I wanted to give you a little background about me. I subscribe to 3 magazines, and the first is The Economist, and the second is Us Magazine, and the third is Rolling Stone. So The Economist, I've loved for years. I have to tell you, I don't get through all of the articles. I don't actually get through many of the articles. I actually don't get through very much at all. But the first paragraph of many of the articles is fascinating, and I like the way it looks on my bedside table. So, the second is Us Magazine, which doesn't really count because my best friend from college keeps giving it to me year after year. And mysteriously, I find time to read all of it. Equally mysteriously, my husband does too. I subscribe to Rolling Stone because it makes me feel young and hip, and because I believe and proclaim that many of the articles are insightful and well-written. So I was reading it this month. Did you guys see it? So it had one of these cover stories about the Rolling Stones' top agents of change. So I read it from start to finish, fascinated with the content. I learned about Barack Obama and Steve Jobs and Bono. It was really inspiring. But by the time I got to the end of it, I was also mystified. Apparently, only men are agents of change. Because as I was looking through the article, there was very few female-looking pictures. So I went back through the article, and I looked for people that looked and sounded like females, and I counted 12. So I was mystified, right? And so I went back, and I thought, how could that be? That doesn't even make sense. So I went back, and I counted the number, and more worrisome were a bunch of mashups, where, so for example, Larry and Sergey were one person. And so if you count all these mashups, only 9% of these agents of change are actually female. So at that point, I became more concerned. I went to Webster's, which is what you normally do when you feel concerned. And I looked up change. So what does change mean? It means to make something different. Now, it turns out that one predictor of making change happen is being promotion-focused. Promotion-focused is defined by the desire or motivation to approach positive things. So trying to get a raise or trying to get a promotion, that would be promotion-focused. In contrast, prevention-focused is defined as the motivation to avoid negative things. So avoid getting fired, avoid losing your job, etc. That would be prevention-focused. And it turns out that the research suggests that in general, men tend to be more promotion-focused and females tend to be more prevention-focused. Now, of course, there's many exceptions, but the allure of avoiding negative things happening to you is significant, especially for women. Now, this is a problem because if you go back to Webster's and you look up change agent, you will find that a change agent is defined as an individual who has the ability to inspire or motivate change in others, change in ideas, change in organizations. It's an individual who uses data to support reasoning, even in face of potential consequences that are unpleasant. So the question is, how do you tackle this challenge or this problem? 3 suggestions I wanted to offer to you. The first, and I must admit that all 3 of these ideas either were informed by research or by men and women who I admire greatly, both in their ability to balance work and job as well as life more generally. The first, take risks. So a consistent call to you have to be risk-taking, you have to not worry about losing your job. This was a quote recently said by someone in the higher rungs of Xerox and subsequently endorsed by a female executive high up in McKinsey and also Goldman. Now, it's very easy to say take risks, not worry about losing your job when you're high up at Goldman or McKinsey, right? But what about the rest of us? There, it seems like don't worry about losing your job seems a little unreasonable. So what might be more reasonable? 2 considerations for you. The first is to take inventory about goals that you have that would allow you to move ahead in your career, but are quite difficult or painful to achieve, right? And set up a rewards system that makes you go after those goals or actually get that negative feedback. So just to give you an example of my life, my job in large part is not only to teach but also to produce research. And so what I'll do is I'll produce, a 40-page paper, I'll submit it to a journal, and then inevitably I will get 20 pages of single-spaced commentary about exactly how bad my work is in incredible detail. And so, and usually it's rejected, or at least sometimes it's rejected, and if you're lucky, you can go back to the drawing table and start all over again and resubmit. Now, every time I get a rejection, my husband has to take me out to a fancy dinner. And in turn, the natural corollary, whenever I get a paper accepted, I take him to a fancy dinner. The second insight here is to surround yourself with people that you love and respect, and people that love and respect you, and then take risks. The work on emotional buffering suggests that if you pair up negative affect with positive affect, the pain of that negative affect is far reduced. The second insight, use data. So when you take a job, pick 3 things you want to do, collect data on how you're doing with them, and take those metrics, and be able to have that data in hand. Now, data collection has a myriad of benefits. I'll just highlight 2 or 3. The first is that it puts you in the right mindset. When you start a job and you collect data, it implies, explicitly and implicitly, that you're open to ideas, that you're open to incoming ideas. And no matter how confident you are, that idea of being open and having data is a good one. The second is that many of us, or many individuals in general, have a difficulty in either self-promoting or talking about positive things you've done in your life, but when you have data, it's a little easier to do so. And third, and relatedly, it helps in storytelling. So when you're telling stories, either about what your team has done or when other people are telling stories about you, the data help become a part of that story. Finally, better clarify the worst-case scenario. So imagine the worst-case scenario, if you do something. Take that anticipated fear and dread and divide it into 3. So all of our research on happiness suggests that we go around in life worrying that you might get fired, worrying you might get cancer, worrying that something might in fact happen, and when in fact that thing happens, there's a little bit of pain, but the pain typically doesn't last more than 2 or 3 days, and in fact, within a very short period of time of something negative happening, you're at the same happiness that you were at before the negative thing happened. The anticipation of losing something or a negative thing happening is 3 times more powerful than your actual experience of that pain. So if you're a happy person now, you're going to be a happy person after you lose your job. It's kind of out there. And the research on health and other negative life events backs this up. So just to conclude, take risks, use data, and better imagine the worst-case scenario. I look forward to seeing many of your faces in Rolling Stones in the near future.